represents the interest of the working men and women in the United States. Black, Hispanic, Asian, white, doesn't matter their color. What it matters is that in trade deals that have unfair competition to American labor or illegal aliens flying across our border so that they can compete with black and Hispanic working class and keep their wages down, that those days are over. That Donald Trump is their representative. And this nullification project takes on many ways. It's three investigative committees on Capitol Hill. And I have no problem if they want to investigate Russian collusion. If they really did that, they could wrap it up in a week. That's not what they're trying to do. And I blame the Republican establishment for those three on Capitol Hill. It should have been done, it should have had a mandate, it should have been wrapped up, and a report should have been done. But you have guys, Democrats like Schiff of California and Mark Warner, who's going to run against President Trump in 2020, running these committees. And Schiff is now blaming me in the last 24 hours. Oh, they're listening to Bannon, they're trying to shut stuff down. I'm just trying to get some good order and discipline in the system. These shouldn't be open-ended investigations of a sitting president by his own party. Then you have the Mueller investigation. I've never been opposed to that. I think with his mandate of Russian collusion, that Mr. Mueller should have free rein to that. But I've also said it shouldn't be some open-ended, mandate just on a fishing expedition or some sort of witch hunt. You also have states' attorney generals now, after the president and his colleagues. You also have, the Morning Joe crowd and Bob Corker talking about the 25th Amendment, talking about the president should be in an adult home. That he's lost a step. And now you have the women's situation of the Billy Bush weekend that was fully litigated and settled on November 8th of 2016 when the American people could weigh and measure it and came to a conclusion and voted him in office. They want to go back and redo that all again. They want to have a siege on the White House from every different direction. To try to take his eye off the ball, to try to suck up his time and energy. And look what he's achieved, both in our sovereignty and our economics and our national security. I believe it's unprecedented in this country in the first year of office. And it's certainly unprecedented with the forces arrayed against him. You have to understand something. Between the opposition party, media, infrastructure, the establishment of Wall Street and Silicon Valley and Hollywood, the imperial capital of Washington, D.C., of both Democrats and Republican establishment, he was sent as a disruptor of that system because the American people said, those people are comfortable with our decline and we're not. And you're our agent of change. And that agent of change means you're going to have to be disruptive. Well, you've seen him be disruptive. And all I see is a string of successes. Now, you wouldn't get that from watching the nightly news or reading the great papers of record of our country, the New York Times, the Washington Post. You just think it's chaos and calamity. Well, you can't get 4% growth in chaos. You can't destroy ISIS, the physical caliphate, destroy it in Mosul and Raqqa with allies. You can't have the Arab world moving now with boldness to eradicate the financing of radical Islamic terrorism. You can't confront China, which should have been done 25 years ago, in chaos. You do it in order, and you do it to instill order. It is revolting to me, disgusting, that the media hounds Donald Trump like they hounded him. Let me go back and state some facts. I had a lovely session with the media, and I don't mean to pick on the Japanese media. I'm using it as a proxy for global mainstream media. Think about how dead wrong the mainstream media was in 2016. The great papers of Europe and the BBC and all the great networks in Europe, okay? And the Times of London and the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, right? The Washington Post, the New York Times, CBS, NBC, CNN. When they got those exit polls at 5 o'clock, and by the way, the exit polls, and I told President Trump as a candidate, from day one, you have a 100% chance of winning. in August 13th, and here's why. Forget all the polls. Forget that you're double digit now. Forget all that. It's only two numbers that count. 2/3 of the American people think we're on the wrong track. 2/3, 1/3. And more importantly, 75% of your countrymen think America's in decline. And if you're the voice that says we're not in decline, you will win. Well, when the exit polls came in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we were getting crushed. It was going to be a landslide for Hillary Clinton. And you can see the celebration starting in these newsrooms. You can see the mocking on Twitter. The mocking and ridiculing of the Trump campaign and President Trump. And guess what? At 2:30 in the morning the following day, Donald J. Trump was President-elect of the United States. Name me one editor, one executive, one writer, one columnist from any news service, television network, paper that were not wrong, dead wrong. Name me one that got fired. You can't, because they weren't. And that tells you everything you need to know about these guys. This is not a free press, right? They're the mouthpiece for a globalist agenda that goes against the basic citizens of the United States of America and every country they deal with. They're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And somebody says, oh, Bannon, there you are pulling out the media. Look at what they've done to President Trump. Have you heard about his successes? Do you hear those successes lauded? No, it's mock and ridicule every day. Let's talk about why Monday is going to be so important. China ascended. To show you what a pathetic job they do, I believe the most important political speech of the 21st century was not President Trump's inaugural address, which at the time it was given was the most important political speech. Even one that's more important than that is President Xi's speech at the 19th Party Congress. 3.5 hours long, I think it's 68 pages. You know, besides a couple of articles are written, some TV coverage, very limited. In the West, it was virtually not covered. Here's why it's important. President Xi not only claimed that we were at kind of economic war with the United States, more importantly, declared it's over, we won. The number 2049, which has been in every other speech they ever gave, which was the 100th anniversary of their success in the Chinese Civil War, of the Chinese communists coming to power in 1949. I don't believe 2049 is ever mentioned the first time in speech. 2050 is mentioned as the beginning of a new era. And they lay out 5 areas where, if completed in the next 5 to 10 years, they will become a hegemon. Number 1 is Made in China 2025, where they're going to dominate the 10 leading cutting-edge industries in the world, including advanced chip manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and robotics. If they win that game, they will dominate global advanced manufacturing, high value-added manufacturing. Also talked about One Belt, One Road. One Belt, One Road, just to make sure you understand the audacious nature of it. They say China's not an expansionist power. Well, they're geopolitically expansionist. They've taken the 3 great theories of 19th and 20th century geopolitics: Mackinder's the Heartland strategy, Mahan's the naval strategy that the British and British built their empire on, and Speakman's sea lines and communications. They've taken the 3 great theories in geopolitics and combined them into one project. Basically, a road that will connect Central Asia and political Islam to the mercantilist authoritative system they've got into one market. A string of pearls, then of naval bases like Mahan and the British dreamed of. And Speakman's sea lines of communication to push Japan in the west and the South China Sea and other areas 1,000 miles off the mainland of Asia. If completed, they understand this, they will be a dominant power. Number 3 is the rollout of 5G. Number 4 is the conversion of the yuan into petrodollars to basically take away the United States' ability to be the reserve currency. And number 5 is advances in financial technology, which will take away the West one piece of leverage, which is to decouple their companies and their banks from global capital markets and from money flows. Once those 5 are completed, game, set, match. And they've used all forces of national strategy to do that. While the West, the elites in the West, have understood that and looked the other way. Now, where does that leave us? President Xi's speech is pretty straightforward. Their strategy is audacious, but it's pretty straightforward. They don't make any bones about it. Of the 3 most dangerous regions in the world, I think, I'm just another guy, but I think is the Gulf, the South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca, and the Northwest Pacific, between Japan and Korea. The South China Sea they call a territorial sea. 2 of those 3, by the way, directly affect the nation of Japan and the Japanese people. The South China Sea, if the South China Sea is cut off, you're cut off from your natural resource supply, your oil supply. And the Northwest Pacific is like the Balkans in 1914. One match, one false move. The law of unintended consequences can cut either way. The intellectuals have this concept called the Thucydides trap, and it's why Japan's so important. It's about, in 16 times, I think Henry Kissinger came up with this theory, and Graham Allison's just written a brilliant book about it. In 16 times in world history, we've had a declining power and a rising power. Of the 16 times, 12 times have been led to massive wars. And only a few times have they been able to manage it. The key to this is that of the declining power. And I think the point that I want to make today is that the United States and Japan do not have to be declining powers. It's not a law of physics that this is happening. This is not the second law of thermodynamics. This is human agency. And we've seen in the United States that working men and women have rejected it. They said, hey, here's a way to avoid the Thucydides trap. Let's not decline. Let's make America great again. Again. And that Donald Trump is our vessel and our instrument to start that change. The same thing is happening in Japan. That's why I'm so glad to be here at CPAC. That's why I'm a huge believer in CPAC, the American Conservative Union, and CPAC. In the United States has been a catalyst and has energized the conservative movement. Matt Schlapp and Dan Snyder have done an incredible job of turning around a moribund institution and making it cutting edge. And I'm so proud of what they've done in doing regional CPACs like in Kansas, in international CPACs. And as soon as I heard about this, I said, hey, I'm coming, I gotta be there. And I can see out in the audience the people I've met last night and today, that there's an energy out there among conservatives. It's not a foregone conclusion that Japan and the United States have to decline and let China rise. Japan has every opportunity to seize its destiny, right? To reestablish its national identity. And in partnership with the United States, a true partnership with the United States, reverse of what the elites have allowed to happen. President Abe, in his relationship, I'm not giving you any inside information. It's out there in the press. He was the first one to get on a plane and come see President Trump. President Trump and him have spent many hours on the golf course bonding as individuals. Prime Minister Abe was the first head of state to be brought to come to Mar-a-Lago. They've got a terrific relationship. I know they feel very, very not just comfortable with each other, but respect each other tremendously. And Prime Minister Abe, I think, is one of those leaders that I admire so much because he's instilled this patriotism and this nationalism. And nationalism is not a bad word. It means love of country, right? If you go back and look at something in President Xi, they talk about the raising President Xi's thought to the level of Deng Xiaoping and Mao Zedong. So it'll be Mao Zedong thought and Deng Xiaoping thought, and now the thought of President Xi. One of the first things they talked about is that his, I don't know, not pan-national, it has some term for it. They said it's the first original thinking in geopolitics in 300 years. 300 years. I said, that's an interesting number. The Chinese, they never are random about numbers. The numbers mean something. I said, what that number means. If you go back 300 years, and I'm not a historian, but I believe you get to the Treaty of Westphalia, the beginning of the nation state, the beginning of the concept of the nation state. President Xi and the regime in Beijing's ambitions are global. They're audacious in their scope, frightening in their scale. And it is upon our generation to confront it, face it, and reverse it. And I think that's why Prime Minister Abe, by being and reinstilling the spirit of nationalism and talking about vital things that have to happen, like the rearmament of Japan, and other issues that may come up, including nuclear weapons in the future, is so fundamentally important to the partnership that we put together. I've gone on a little too long, but I want to summarize one last thing. We're going through, for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, the valley of decision. And go back and study what happened in other eras, the 1930s or other eras, where leaders of the world, leaders on the side of freedom, appeased people, didn't face reality, kicked the can down the road. All the easy decisions are decades behind us. We don't have any easy choices. We don't have any easy decisions. There are no easy options in the range of alternatives. There's only hard choices. There's only tough choices. But here's one thing I know. As a young naval officer in the 7th Fleet on the destroyer, I had the great honor to work in naval exercises with the Self-Defense Force of Japan and to see the men and women of the Japanese military. There's not a finer group of people in the world. And I know that if the great bonds of friendship, the great bonds of camaraderie we have between our country and the country of Japan and other countries out there, India, Singapore, other countries around the South China Sea, other countries that only want to be left alone to pursue their own national destinies. If we come together and come together as friends and partners, there's sunlit uplands ahead of us. But there's 10 or 15 years of tough choices and tough times. I want to thank you for inviting me here to the first CPAC.
Thank you very much. 本当にこんな長く喋っていただけるとは思ってなかった。いいですね。今日はパネルということだったんですけど、私の職業柄記者だもんで、いろいろご質問をしたいなと。でご一緒に参加していただきますのが、小川太郎さん、ご存知だと思いますが、文芸評論家。どうぞ。
Was that upbeat enough for a Sunday morning?
Being a reporter by profession, I will have to ask you some difficult question maybe. You spoke of the threat of China. We all agree. But why did you cancel TPP? Because it was not a trade agreement at all. It's China Containment Program. TPP is Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's not Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. And we really regret that after that you canceled. China proudly hailed their new Silk Road project. And we really feel bad about it.
I think TPP is once again, just like certain treaties, like even in NATO. Let's talk about NATO for a second. You know, the EU has essentially gotten a free ride off the United States. We can't get the NATO allies to pay 2% of their GDP for national defense. I think Great Britain, France, and all the rest of NATO can only put up 3 or 4 combat divisions to protect themselves. The United States, essentially, it's a protectorate of the United States, and it's looked at as the United States as the last line of defense, right? I know I'll get tremendous criticism for that. President Trump has said that over and over again. The Secretary General of NATO said that President Trump was his best partner in trying to make NATO a more robust alliance. TPP was the same type of thing, the same type of ill-defined, generalized agreement that the United States is not going to get into anymore. America First means America in partnership, directly in bilateral agreements with countries. And so, what I would recommend is we get a bilateral trade deal with our partners in Japan, one that works for both parties, so we, the United States, don't have a $70 billion a year deficit, because we can't continue to do that, and we're not going to continue to do that. And we develop our military alliance and make it stronger. What we'll end up doing this is strong bilateral agreements with partners. We have trade deals that work for each other, and we have a military alliance that everybody throws into the till. And so the people in the United States know that exactly what their obligations are going to be. The days of these TPP, of these general obligations, let me just talk about it for a second. I'm going to go from Europe all the way through the Persian Gulf, to the Straits of Malacca, to the Northwest Pacific. The United States is upside down on every trade deal. Yet, it is American taxpayers and American kids that underwrite that security. It's the United States of America that is the security guarantor of the rules-based international post-war order. And it is time not to hide behind things like TPP anymore. It's time for the United States, in partnership with allies, not protectorates. Because in TPP, you can act as a protectorate. That's not in your best interest, and it's certainly not in the United States' best interest. And it's not going to happen anymore. That is, I think, the underpinnings of the Trump revolution. That's what it means by America First. It doesn't mean American isolation. It doesn't mean America not in partnership with Japan. We're more engaged in the Northwest Pacific than we've ever been. We have 3 battle groups. 3 battle groups. Over here right now. 3 battle groups. Who else in the world is helping us out that much? I was a naval officer in the 7th Fleet. I was proud to be a naval officer. I love Asia. I always wanted to come here as a kid, and proud to serve with the Japanese Navy. But the South China Sea in those days was absolutely free navigation. There was no question about that, and everybody understood it was the lifeblood to South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, and that's why it was a vital national security interest of the United States. So what has happened over the last 10 years, last 15 years? The Chinese call it a territorial sea. How did that happen? How did these stable aircraft carriers they built? Because global institutions and global organizations couldn't come to grips with it. And that's why I think President Trump has been so brave and courageous to actually say that he will be engaged here. But the days of the TPP type of amorphous arrangements are over.
Speaking of the American Asian policy, who is conducting, the thinker, because what I'm saying is that when Trump administration started, Mr. Trump called Taiwan president, and it made a big fuss. But I understand it was by you or Mr. Navarro who planned it, and I thought it was a very good start. Then somehow it turned the other way around, and Mr. Trump seems to like President Xi Jinping very much personally, and that worries us.
That's why I think Monday is so important. Let's go back. And actually, the Taiwan president called President Trump. Here's the one thing I would want everybody to take away from this, is that President Trump sets his strategy. He's always derided and mocked and ridiculed as a strategist and a thinker and someone who understands geopolitics. He's a very astute and brilliant businessman that's a great negotiator that has done deals all over the world. Okay? If you go back and look at what he said about China for the last 30 years, it's dead spot on. And if we had implemented what President Trump was saying as a private citizen 30 years ago, we would not be in the jam we're in today. And we're in a jam. That's because Donald J. Trump, his thinking about China, his understanding of Asia. Now, I understand when the call came in, and by the way, I would respectfully submit it was neither Peter Navarro's idea. But President Trump, because he's a man of peace, the opposition party, what did they say about him in the campaign? He's trigger happy. He shouldn't be allowed near nuclear weapons. He's a danger. There has not been one president we've ever had that's been more judicious, that's been more reflective. It took us 6 months to make the Afghanistan decision. Why? He continues to question. He probes. He will not take simple answers. And that's what you saw in Asia. After Prime Minister Abe came, he had President Xi. And he reached out. We had these committees and these groups. And he reached out to him on Korea. He reached out to him on trade. And I think you're saying, as reported by the Financial Times and Reuters on Monday, will be a strategy that for the first time, it calls China a strategic competitor, right? Not a strategic partner, strategic competitor, and calls them an guilty of economic aggression against the United States, Japan, and the West. Okay? That is by the way, that's been being worked on the entire time. No president, neither Bush nor Clinton, had the guts to issue a 301, which essentially said, you're not going to steal our intellectual property anymore. You're not going to take our intellectual property for market access. That's Donald Trump. So yes, I understand. By the way, he wants to have warm relationships, just like they criticize him for trying to have a warm relationship with Putin. Wouldn't we like to end the Cold War? You know, the people that all rag on President Trump and get on him, my daughter's a graduate of the United States. I was a naval officer. My kid brother's a Navy pilot. I have nephews in the military, family members in the military. My daughter is a graduate of West Point and served with the 101st Airborne in Iraq. Now, I don't deserve any special. We're just another blue-collar family. We are just people, working-class people whose kids serve. It's those families that would like us to have peace with Russia. It's those families that would love us to work out something with China. It's those families that understand we have a partnership and alliance with Japan. That is the Trump revolution. It's working class people who pay the bills and whose kids are some of the 7,000 dead in the Middle East and 52,000 wounded. The present value of our wounded, the net present value of the care of our wounded, according to the Watson study, is $1 trillion. And it's not the money, it's the agony. Think of the agony that goes into that $1 trillion. That's what the hobbits in Ohio, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Iowa, in North Carolina. Trump's thing didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a rejection by working people in the United States of America of where the elites have put us. And to say that our children are no longer expendable. And our capital and our treasure is no longer expendable on your projects.
よろしいですか。TPP の先ほどに戻りますけれども、二国間を優先するという選択ですよね。二国間を。で、例えば日米なら日米、そしてアジアの諸国と二国の関係をむしろ強化していくというのはよくわかるんですけども、先ほどおそらく木村さんの趣旨もそうだと思うんですが、やはりアジア全体に対する中国のプレゼンスがどんどん大きくなっていく中で、自由貿易を本当に守る盟主としての日米という立ち位置を作るということは非常に重要だと思うんですね。で、タイミングが今なのか、もう少しアメリカの内政をトランプさんが、プレジデントが確立してからかは別にしても、この包括的に自由貿易をアジア圏で守るという発想に対してはどうお考えでしょう。
First off, you used a very hot word, free trade. Okay? Free trade is a radical idea. Free trade is a radical idea. The Chinese don't practice free trade, they're a mercantilist system. We want our brethren, our allies, our partners in Japan to give us some free trade. No, we would love, I think, yes, TPP was all fine. But let's be honest. Japan, India, Australia, South Korea, the major powers, right, that have to be put together. What we have to do is a strong bilateral deal with trade with Korea and the United States. With the United States, and President Trump has been, I think, he calls it reciprocity. Reciprocity. President Trump has been enormously consistent about this since he came in. He wants reciprocity. We're not going to get into these big amorphous deals where we don't really understand the trading relationships, and guess what? TPP was a perfect sucker's bet for the United States. No offense, it's like NATO, right? You guys get a free ride, you get a free option. You want to translate? You want to? That's true. I didn't see any clap. I didn't see any applause. I'm just kidding. The rejection of TPP means there's no more free option. We're not going to enter into these big amorphous deals where the United States at the end of the day becomes the security guarantor of a bunch of folks that are not going to pull their weight. Bilateral agreements with real partners and real allies that work on what President Trump has done, which is extraordinary. He's linked, okay, economics with national security. The combination of commercial relationships, trade deals, capital markets, and national security is all now tied together. But you do it in a way that you understand exactly what the deal is. And so, all I can recommend, if the Japanese intelligentsia is sitting around waiting for us to re-hit the bid on TPP, it's not going to happen.
ありがとうございます。より強い二国間同盟が複数アジアとアメリカの中で結ばれると、それ自体がパワーになるというお考えだというふうに大体理解しました。そうすると、少し私今日本で、大手メディアと、喧嘩をしている最中なんで、少しその点からお話ししますとですね、その自由、いわゆる我々民主主義国家の中で今非常にその共同して戦いにくくなっている大きな原因がリベラルメディアの変更だというふうに思っています。その点多分バノンさんと認識を一致していると思うんですけれども、で何が起こっているかというと、自由社会のリベラルメディアが、保守的な考え方やあるいは保守的な政権を非常に攻撃をすると、それをすればするほど実は中国に対して自由社会側が弱体化しているんではないかというのが私の基本的な認識なんですが、バノンさんのその点についてのお考えをちょっと伺いたいと思います。
the mainstream media, the liberal media, remember, they are the running dogs of the globalist. They are they're a propaganda machine. And I'm not just picking on our brethren here in Japan. It's worse in the United States, and worse than that in Western Europe. If you are a nationalist, right? First thing they call you is an ethno-nationalist or a white supremacist. No. President Trump is the most colorblind person I've ever met. He believes in, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, your color, your religion, your place of origin, your gender, or your sexual preference. As long as you're a citizen of the American Republic, you're not going to be abused by the economic hate crimes that have been foisted on the American people through these horrific trade deals and trade relationships. And so I realize the burden here in Japan is just like in the United Kingdom. I mean, the Breitbart site in London was quite tiny, but at least allowed the ideas of UKIP and ideas of the working class people in England for Brexit, which, remember, when Brexit started, they were mocked and ridiculed. A week before Brexit, they said they were down 8 points, and they won. In fact, I think they actually declared that the Remain campaign was going to win early in the evening. So, I can tell you from the legacy media, these new startups and conservative media that are another voice and are a platform for another voice, I think are going to be a big part of the future of media. And by the way, I'm a capitalist. The mainstream media in Japan should welcome robust competition from a range of media, and let the best companies win.
Speaking of fake news.
Can we have another question about TPP?
I think we Japanese are victimized by American fake news. Am I saying too much? Because what we have is all mainstream media, and Japanese medias are affiliated to those media. So we don't have any alternative news source. And I know you're having Breitbart. My suggestion is, why don't you have your in Tokyo and publish it one in Japanese?
Just to make their heads blow up, we're definitely looking at starting a Breitbart Asia and Breitbart in Japan, South Korea, and other places. We'll spend a lot of time. Anybody that wants to volunteer, I'd love to talk to people afterwards. No, but I think it's a great point. In fact, somebody told me when I came over here, if I could actually address the fact, and that's why I talked about the nullification project. They said, with all the news coverage that you get in Japan, you would think that President Trump's going to be impeached tomorrow morning. Okay. He is not only not going to get impeached, that if President Trump stays on completing what he's promised he would complete, and that he's already done such a great job in his first year, not only are we going to hold the Senate and the House in 18, President Donald J. Trump will win re-election with 400 electoral votes. The hobbits and the deplorables and the forgotten men and women that put him in office in November of 2016 will never allow him to be run out of office. They will only be there for him to make sure he wins a glorious re-election.
Yeah. Speaking of next election, being a journalist, I have to throw you a nasty question. After Alabama, have you changed your thought of fighting with Mitch McConnell's people, I mean mainstream GOPs, that include probably Mr. Trump? Do you have changed that strategy?
Absolutely not. I think Alabama is a great example of, you got to remember, everything you see in the fake news industry on cable TV in the foreground, whether it's CNN or MSNBC or Fox, is all pro wrestling, right? It's all fake, right? It's what really goes behind, it's what really goes on. We have one party, the Uniparty. It was the Republican establishment, led by Mitch McConnell, that helped weaponize the information that got to the Washington Post and tried to destroy Judge Moore. The Republican establishment was very comfortable with giving up a seat to a progressive Democrat. All their cards were on the table. Senator Shelby came out on Sunday morning on the talk shows and said he was going to write in another candidate. That was the tipping point. The number of write-ins are greater than the margin for defeat. The Republican establishment from the very beginning, in the constant battle, and by the way, it was Chuck Todd of NBC that said, from the time the information came out in the Washington Post to Mitch McConnell 57 minutes later saying Moore's got to step down. It looked like an organized hit. It's the Republican establishment has shown their cards to the Trump movement that they would rather have a radical, progressive, leftist like Doug Jones in the United States Senate. So all their whining and all their crocodile tears washes over the Trump movement. We're going to actually hold them more accountable. What we need in the United States Senate is people that have the president's back. And they say, well, all these guys vote for President Trump most of the time. I said, Bob Corker comes out and says, the President of the United States, who's taking on China, we have troops in the field in the Hindu Kush of Afghanistan, we have a very dangerous situation in Saudi Arabia and Qatar in the Gulf. And yet, Bob Corker, who is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, can come out and say that the president needs adult daycare, and who's got the morning watch? Right? And not one Republican senator, led by Barrasso and Deb Fischer and others are for re-election, Heller, not one have come to the sticks and said, it is unacceptable for you as a chairman to say that about a commander-in-chief in time of war from my party, and you should retract the statement or step down as chairman. Not one. And the Trump movement, the hobbits and the deplorables will not find this acceptable. They know exactly. Go ask the folks in Alabama. They know who threw that election to the Democrats. No, we won't back off 1 inch. And people, by the way, I didn't quit on Billy Bush weekend, and I ain't quitting now. I wasn't such a tough person.
Correct me if I was wrong. I think it was Vanity Fair, October this year, quoting you, saying that Mr. Trump has 30% chance of fulfilling his term. Was it another fake news?
That was fake news. Fake news. No, because that's what they wish would happen. And they know that the hardcore Trump supporters, right? And I've said, in fact, I came out when that thing was permanent. I came in the next day and said, not only will he fulfill it, when he runs for re-election, we will win 400 electoral votes with the way that he's accomplishing objectives. They remember, we came within 1 point of winning Minnesota, and we only went there one time. States like New Hampshire, which they stole from us, we've proven now in the Electoral Commission, they stole New Hampshire from us. Minnesota, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, all of these states are in play now. And if President Trump just keeps on, he's got 4% economic growth right now. If the tax cut kicks in like we think he could have 5% growth or greater. So no, I think President Trump's on a way for, if he decides to win a massive re-election. And I think Vanity Fair is, once again, fake news.
もしですね、今ちょうど経済成長の話がありましたけども、日本でも安倍政権になって、劇的な経済的な回復が見られます。5年間の間に有効求人倍率 0.7 から 1.5 のようなですね、ほとんど日本の経済が最盛期に近づいているにもかかわらず、やはり日本の大手メディアでの、安倍叩きというのは、壮絶を極めているんですね。そしてこの日本でももちろん権力を監視するのは重要ですけれども、しかし日本でもアメリカでもヨーロッパでも実際に国民にとっての国益になる、そういう政府をメディアが国民の考え方と大幅にずれたところで批判し続けている状況があると思っていますが、その中でバノさんがブライトバードを今この数年経営されている。で、ヨーロッパの 保守系の戦いは相当私は厳しい状況になって、むしろ極右化が進んでいると思いますが、アメリカでうまくいった、あるいはブライトバードの果たした役割というのはどういうものなんでしょうか。
Look, I think to a large extent, Prime Minister Abe was really Trump before Trump. He talked about, right, a nation's pride, a nation's destiny, a nation taking control of its future. It was that nationalism that he installed into the conversation in Japan that I think was so controversial, that complete utter rejection and shock and dismay by the global elite media. I think today, when I got to my hotel last night, I had the Japan Times in front of me, and on the front they showed the tremendous confidence that manufacturing executives in this country have because of Prime Minister Abe's policies. And you can see his policies kicking in, President Trump's policies kicking in, two leaders who think alike. And yet, you just follow the media every day. It's a constant barrage of negativity. It's a constant barrage. What they're trying to do is every day, by putting in people's head, particularly people that don't pay that close attention, they want the background noise to be to delegitimize them, to make their jobs even harder. And that's why I'm so proud of the Breitbart site, right? And there's others that are in the United States that are coming up that will be just as good. I like that. I love competition. I'm a capitalist. But I'm very proud that Breitbart fights above their weight. The Harvard study that the New York Times Magazine had a cover story about us about a month ago. Harvard did a study that showed, the news site that has the most political punch of any of them, regardless of their size, was not CNN, was not the New York Times, was not the Washington Post, was not the Huffington Post, it was Breitbart. And that's because conservatives are hungry for the truth. And you'll find that there are more conservatives out there than you think. They may not be registered Republicans, but those are the people that voted for Donald Trump, and those are the people that understand that what's back here is a total scam. They're just, all they are is the mouthpieces for a globalist elite. I call them the party at Davos, right? The party at Davos. And they're the information officers of the party at Davos. But your compadres, your fellow citizens are hungry for the truth. And so I hope in Japan, and I hope one day to be able to, not too soon, to be able to launch Breitbart Asia and have it headquartered in Tokyo. But regardless, if there are other Japanese entrepreneurs that will do it, when you launch these, you will find out that there is a hunger out there for this news. There's a hunger out there for this information. There's a hunger for something more than they've been spoon-fed. People want freedom. And people want to be in charge of their own destinies and their own future. And as long as we have that, and as long as we provide a platform to get alternatives to what the mainstream tells us, we're going to be fine.
I was pushed to take questions from the audience. Would you mind? Wait a minute. Some female question. Okay. Gender equality.
Thank you very much. I was so moved by your talk. My name is Sako Matsumoto from Nagoya City University. I'm professor and teaching international relations. And talking about the bilateral relations, which you emphasize, Japan, US, and it's very convincing. And you are very critical about international organizations such as United Nations. And you are completely true, but in some other aspects, in order to pressurize a country like China, because their Chinese people are suppressed freedom of speech, undermine the human rights, etc. So in order to pressurize China, international organization could be useful. And then so you are still very negative about United Nations or international organization?
I think that it's a great question, and I think that they can be useful, but I don't think that the primary source. Look, we're in not good shape. You know, I just went through the 5 areas that if the current regime in Beijing completes One Belt, One Road, the rollout of 5G, right? Made in China 2025. The West and Japan and our allies will be at a significant disadvantage and may be unable to unwind that. The United Nations is not going to help either. We got to face reality. And the United Nations, these other groups are fine in doing kind of augmenting what has to be done. What has to be done is what allies like Japan and the United States binding together in the Northwest Pacific in demanding that China take full and complete accountability over North Korea. That is a vital national security interest right now for Japan. And the UN is going to be tangential. Look at the UN sanctions that just took place. And I think, and I tip my hat to Ambassador Nikki Haley, her entire team that went and got the twice, I think, against North Korea, sanctions put in there. But I think everybody would agree that those sanctions, you know, how are they being enforced? What really has to happen is pressure of the United States and Japan directly to China to say we have to cut off the oil, you have to cut off the ballistic missile technology, you have to cut off all the expertise, you have to cut it off. And if you do not cut it off, there are going to be significant repercussions. And what we mean by that is real sanctions on your companies, and we're going to decouple your banks from the global capital markets. The United Nations is not going to help you do that. The IMF is not going to help you do that. So yes, I think all these post-war institutions are very important, but I think in this current situation, once again, it's bilateral relationships, and particularly in this case, to Japan and the United States.
日本語でもいいですよ。どうぞお手を挙げてください。どうしようかな。
Make America great again.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am Yoko Mara, aka Random Yoko on YouTube. I'm a YouTuber, basically. I'm the biggest Trump supporter in Japan. I wanted to...
It was just randomly I called on her.
Yeah, and I'm Random Yoko. So what I wanted to ask you is about the National Day that President Trump set signed for the victims of communism, like after the 100 years of Bolshevik, the revolution. And we Japanese were very happy to hear about the National Day that President Trump signed, because we're fighting the same fight here in Japan, which is the transformation of communism, communism fight, which is the globalist fight. And I wanted to ask what you think of the National Day that Trump signed.
Well, I think it's terrific. I think that the victims of, look, the 20th century was the bloodiest century in mankind's history, right? It was the bloodiest century in mankind's history. But we do have to remember one thing. The Russians were our allies in World War II to defeat the Nazis. So, sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We always have to keep that in mind. I realize the global scourge of communism, which we thought came to an end in 1992. It turned out it didn't. So I think it's great that we're remembering those. I know it's a very important thing for President Trump.
Can I say one more thing?
在日人の法人だけでなくて、法人の避難についてですね、なんか米国としか話をしないっていうのが出てましたけれども、私は
続けてください。
私は在日米軍との関係はいささか深い関係にありまして、でその助言に基づいて 安倍総理に2年以上前に在日邦人の避難について話をしておくべきだということを2年以上前に安倍総理に申し上げております。でところが在韓邦人の日本への避難については韓国の大統領はアメリカとだけ話をしたいと言ってですね、でこれ象徴的な問題なんですけど、避難といざという時に避難だったらもちろん米国人在韓邦人ももちろんですけども、韓国人の避難さえも考えているんですね、日本に押し寄せることをですね。ところが韓国が日本以外の米軍としか話をしないとはちょっと。
There we go.
Thank you.
要するに避難問題は日本とちゃんと韓国とやれとこういうことでよろしいんですか。
はい。それを。
ということでちょっとお答えいただきます。Korean to go for respect to evacuation of the war.
I think obviously that has to be worked out with the South Korean government, but hopefully we're in a situation that war is not going to come to the Korean Peninsula. That's why I think it's incumbent upon leaders, and I think President Trump has done a tremendous service to the Northwest Pacific in trying to engage China and take care of the situation. I mean, President Trump this has been at the forefront of his mind. You can read I'm not giving you any inside information, I'm just reporting what I see in the press. But as much as I've been concerned about people in the Japanese in the peninsula of Korea, I think the Japanese people ought to start getting worried about Japanese on the island of Japan. I mean, it shouldn't be lost on you where these ballistic missiles are being tested over. And I'm not seeing the level of, and I appreciate the fact that people are worried about the embarkation of Japanese citizens in South Korea to come to Japan. But if the balloon goes up and there's war in South Korea, a place to hide is not going to be Japan.